Today's going to be a little bit of a curveball, which you guys know I like to throw every now and then on a Saturday. After the live stream on Tuesday, when we were talking about the sweetener that I was putting in my coffee, I had plans to bake an almond cake, which is really delicious, tastes as sweet as anything you've ever had with sugar in it, but has minimal impact on your sugar levels, as the only sugar or carbs that are in the cake are what is naturally occurring in the almonds and other nuts that are used to bake it. We will start with 2 heaping cups of almond flour. I use this Blue Diamond brand, or at least this is the last couple bags that I bought, but I've used other brands as well. I will include the printed recipe later in the video. So how precise you are with your heaping cups, that's just up to you. It's not going to make a whole lot of difference with the amount of sweetener and the distance that the sweetener goes in this recipe, along with the other ingredients like the heavy whipping cream and eggs that are going to provide the moisture. You're going to be all right if you have a variance in the measurements of that main dry ingredient. Now, the next thing that we're going to measure out is our sweetener. I have several brands of this that I've used. I personally think that this Pure brand, P-Y-U-R-E, is the best. I got this bag of Swerve, which is just about identical. I believe all the nutritional values were the same. The only difference is the Pure uses a stevia extract, which, according to the package, they claim is actually 2 times sweeter, that you can measure it out half as much as you do sugar. I use pretty much 1-to-1 like I would for sugar in the recipes that I use it for, and 3 good solid spoonfuls in my coffee every day. But for this particular recipe, we are going to use ½ cup, but we are going to measure it with 2 quarters. The first quarter we just pour all the way in. The second one we're going to pour about half, because we're going to use the rest of that for the topping on the cake, which we are going to apply partly before we bake and partly at the end. Next, we will measure out a ½ teaspoon of baking soda. Ideally, all these dry ingredients, you would mix those around and sift them together. Get it mixed up well together before you put the wet ingredients in, which now we're going to put what I would consider to be our first wet ingredient, the coconut oil. We're going to use a good 1/3 cup, which I was running a little bit lower than I thought I was. So it took me a minute to gather an entire 1/3 cup out of the bottom of this jar. Next will be our second wet ingredient, which is going to be 1 egg. Just crack it, dump it in there. Try not to sling it across your work surface like I did. So I will get that cleaned up right quick. As I was saying earlier, you might get a better product if you'll sift all your dry ingredients together first. I'm now going to add the cocoa, 2 full tablespoons of it. I just use cheap, great value Walmart brand cocoa and have no complaints as to the quality. Again, it may not look like a lot, but when you get that dispersed in with the almond flour and the amount of almond flour that you got there, 2 tablespoons to the 2 heaping cups, for me, is a good mixture. You can feel free to adjust that as you wish, though, for the cocoa flavor that you desire. So now we are going to mix up our ingredients, and the majority of our time on this recipe, other than baking, is going to be spent mixing. So I'm going to fast forward through a good part of that here till we get it all nice and smooth, as even as possible. Then we're going to measure out and add a full cup of whipping cream. That'll stir in and incorporate fairly easily, and then you're going to be left with a much more fluid material to pour into your baking dish. Take a couple of good-sized handfuls of walnuts or some other kind of nut that you would like to add for texture, flavor, whatever floats your boat. Get that mixed up all nice. Now you take a can of cooking spray, spray down the sides and bottom of an 8x8 Pyrex or other baking dish. You're going to be cooking this at 350 degrees, so the dish that you're putting it in is not all that important because we're not cooking it that hot. You want to get that down into the baking dish now after you have it sprayed. It's fairly pliable, but not necessarily what you would think of as the texture of a cake batter. More so a maybe a brownie mix, or it's just a stiffer texture. It's going to cook up very light and fluffy though. Now for the topping, I'm going to take a couple of handfuls of pecans and just crush them, kind of pulverize them in my hand, spread the dust, the bits, the pieces, the chunks of pecan all around the top, and provide a foundation that we are going to then drench with butter, sprinkle with a heavy dose of cinnamon and sweetener, and really give the cake that touch that kicks it up a notch, really makes it special. We want to save a little bit of that butter to finish it off with sweetener when we pull it out of the oven. So now we will sprinkle the majority, I'd say probably about 2/3 of the sweetener that we have left. So about 2/3 of that half of a quarter cup. And get a good layer of that on there. And then follow that with some ground cinnamon. Good heavy layer of ground cinnamon. The sweetener is going to add a really nice sort of crunchy coating, thin crunchy layer, and along with that cinnamon is a tasty treat. Place that on the center rack of your oven, which should be set at 350 degrees. You want to cook that for exactly 45 minutes. At 45 minutes, you pull it out, sprinkle it with the remainder of the butter and sugar, and you are ready to eat.
So if you have a sweet tooth, but for health reasons, whatever, we haven't even really got into that, the reasons why I am eating this way, and it really isn't relevant. The real purpose here is to share some things that I've learned. I am eating a very strict diet right at the moment, but I'm not suffering one bit in what I eat. I enjoy everything that I consume, and just wanted to share that. Until next time.